As one of League's oldest champions to date, Misfortune has always stuck around as a teamfight dominating AD carry that can mow down entire teams when placed correctly. With a very satisfying kit that has a mix of high AoE damage output, the ability to force priority and movement in many matchups, and relevance in most team compositions, it's very surprising that her kit is still so relevant after all of these years. While it's had a few tweaks and changes and a complete model rework over the years, the overarching design of her playstyle has remained. In this video, I'll break down exactly how to succeed on this champion and show you why firsthand as to why Misfortune can dominate the meta so frequently. Before we get on to the video, here's a quick rundown so you know what's coming. First, we'll cover Misfortune's champion identity and where she fits amongst her counterparts in the bottom lane. Then we'll review her abilities, runes, builds, combos, and add helpful tips, lane matchups, support pairings, and overall her general playstyle in each stage of the game. So if you haven't already, please make sure to subscribe for more content like this. Let's start with champion identity. Misfortune's design is incredibly simple. She's a pirate that wants to knock down all enemies in her path. She's a tremendous lane bully in the early stages of the game because of her passive and early game damage, so it's easy for a good Misfortune player to really grab a quick lead and just run with it. To play this champion well does not necessarily require a ton of mechanics. However, it instead requires you to have a lot of planning to ensure you have the optimal setup and strategy to win your game, and then simply execute on that plan. Misfortune is one of the rare champions that has multiple builds that can work at any given time, which makes her not only exceptionally difficult to master, but exceptionally good to pick nearly every game. Overall, Misfortune is a fantastic champion to blind pick or round out nearly any team composition with, since she provides a unique form of damage on her abilities, area of effect damage, early game pressure, and a significant range advantage on most champions. Her versatile build pathing and rune choices can make for a deadly player who can pilot her well. Let's move on to her abilities. So starting with her passive, Love Tap, Misfortune's passive empowers her basic attacks to pretty much apply a mark that expires when attacking an enemy. When unmarked, the basic attack deals bonus damage, and this is a lot of it. In the early game, this means that despite her low attack speed, even if she only gets one basic attack when her opponent gets two, it's pretty much almost an even trade. The added benefit to this is that she last hits minions a lot easier than most. Now onto her Q, being Double Up. Misfortune's Double Up fires a bullet at a target, dealing damage and bouncing to another enemy behind them. Double Up acts as a basic attack for a quick punch, and if lined up to last an enemy and then bounce to the enemy champion, it will actually deal bonus damage because it counts as a crit. Now onto her W, being Strut, and Misfortune's Strut passively gives her movement speed that is essentially free boots when returning from base. This bonus pretty much only persists if Misfortune is not taking damage actively. However, she can activate Strut to regain that speed. Not only that, Misfortune also gains bonus attack speed for up to 4 seconds when activating Strut. This makes Strut basically a steroid-like ability to boost her overall damage output as well. Best of all, its cooldown will reduce every time a new target is marked with Love Tap, so it makes it a really decent kiting tool in the heat of a team fight. It's also excellent for wave clear because you can just aggro it between minions or turrets or even champions and just have it up permanently. Misfortune's E is Make It Rain, and it's an area of effect ability that rains down bullets on a target location for a couple of seconds. This grants sight of the area, dealing magic damage every quarter second, and slows enemies by 50%. Make It Rain is basically her bread and butter basic ability of her kit, as its range is enough to poke down almost any enemy, the damage adds up very quickly, and the slow allows for decent gank setup, and combined with Strut, makes for a great way to stick to any escaping enemy as well. Finally, Misfortune's ultimate, being Bullet Time, is probably one of the most satisfying ultimates to land in a massive team fight. Misfortune channels for 3 seconds, firing multiple waves of bullets in a cone shape, dealing insane damage. To add on to this damage, each wave also has a chance to critically strike, so it even further increases this damage ratio. Now let's talk about her runes and items. There are 2 main Misfortune builds that you should be aware of if you want to take full advantage of her kit. There's traditionally the critical strike build, and then there's a lethality build. However, there's also a hybrid build that's also been gaining a lot of popularity, so we'll talk about that potentially as well. All of these builds have tremendous value when built in the right circumstances, so it's important to know exactly when to use them. Starting with runes, the best setup is going to be press the attack when you want to play critical strike MF, and the alternative is comet when you want to play lethality or hybrid builds. With the critical strike build, you'll want to build Kraken Slayer most of the time, whereas a lethality build requires Eclipse, and the hybrid build actually requires Leander's Anguish as your mythic. For the crit build, after Kraken Slayer, you'll actually want to grab Collector most of the time, as it synergizes excellently with your ultimate. The DOT on it essentially ensures that you'll be able to secure the 5% damage to execute and make sure you get a lot of value out of that. If there's a lot of tanks on the enemy team that you want to shred, you can feel free to go Lord Dominic's Regard instead. After that, going Infinity Edge third will be a classic take for an excellent spike by that stage of the game, and after that you have a few item options to pick up depending on what you'd like. Bloodthirster is an awesome overall take if you're not sure what to get. Defensive options like Guardian Angel or even Maw of Mordius are also excellent for rounding out your defensive capability. For boots here, you generally want to go Berserker Graves as well. As for the lethality build, you'll want to start your game with a Tear, and then Rush Eclipse, then Man Immune, and then Cerilda's Grudge. After this core build, you'll want to finish off with a couple of situational items. Alternatively, if your team could use more AP damage, you can actually start the game as if you're building lethality. Starting with Tear, and then completing the Man Immune provides enough attack damage to get through lane, where you can then transition into the Leander's Anguish mythic item purchase. After these 2 items, you'll want to build Cerilda's Grudge, and then again finish off the build with some situational items. Essentially, the only main difference between these 2 is the mythic item and the timing on building that mythic item. Both options work well when Misfortune can't get close enough to auto-attack enemies, and is much more reliant on her abilities to deal deal damage. The decision at that point is just whether that damage needs to be attack damage or AP based damage. Now touching on combos and helpful tips with abilities. MF's kit is pretty simple, so there aren't really many combos that exist with her. The most important is to ensure you can land as many waves as bullet time as possible by first slowing the enemy with making rain. Otherwise, in lane, it's important to remember that because of Misfortune's stats being low and relying on her passive and abilities for her true damage output, you don't want to commit to long trades and instead should only look for 1 or 2 basic attacks at a time. If you're playing with PTA, you can step in for the basic attack, follow up with the second, and then quickly fire double up to activate the rune. Another great tip for using MF's abilities for some extra heat is to start with a double up on your target when there is another enemy behind that. This will ensure that the love tap activates on the first target, then marks the second target so that she can immediately follow up with a basic attack on the first for a second activation of the passive for some bonus damage in quick succession. The last helpful tip to make a great MF player is to set up a minion to execute with the double up, then bounce onto the enemy champion, and before using double up, slowing the enemy with make it rain to ensure they stay within the location needed to land that massive double up crit. Now let's touch on matchups. Misfortune is one of the few marksmen that is not phased by any bot laner per se. Instead, she struggles more against the picks on the top side of the map actually. So champions like Jarvan, Kiana, and Akali mop the floor with her, so it's not ideal to necessarily draft into these enemies. However, zeroing in on the bot lane itself, Misfortune's worst matchup statistically will be champions like Seraphine because she outranges and outclears the wave faster than MF. With this wave management advantage, Seraphine can minimize Misfortune's optimal time to outclass her opponents by barely being close enough to even hit. Ziggs is kind of a similar champion with this identity. Another lackluster matchup would actually be against Jhin. Jhin would normally take boots of Swifties and have fleet footwork, meaning he has decent sustain in lane and partially ignores the slow from making rain, which can make it a matchup that Misfortune again cannot take full advantage of. Jhin also has enough range and pressure in the early game to actually take advantage of MF and actually shut her down in the early game. With the rest of the matchups out there in the bot lane though, while there are some that are more difficult than others, the right runes will make the world of a difference. Ideally, against more aggressive marksmen that want to engage the trade like Lucian or Kai'Sa, taking PTA is more likely to make for an even trade, in which case the matchup is quite favorable for MF overall. In other matchups where the opponent does not have that gap closure, Misfortune can take advantage with her range and area of effect slow, burning chip damage throughout the laning phase. Overall, most matchups Misfortune can get away with being a bully in lane, so it's important to not overstep and keep an eye out for their jungler and mid laner. Let's touch on some support pairings. Because of how strong Misfortune is in the early game, she works exceptionally well with any kind of support pairing. The most ideal situation in drought is that Misfortune is blind picked, and then support is picked to counter the enemy laners drafted. Since MF has multiple rune and item choices, she is a tremendously safe option that has few bad matchups that can easily be made up for with a well-drafted support. However, the best supports to pair with MF overall are either supports with hard engage, like Rel, Blitzcrank, or Amumu, or supports with heavy poke, like Heimerdinger, Zillion, Vel'Koz, and Zyra. Now let's touch on MF in each stage of the game. The early game as Misfortune is meant to be easy. It really is, but it's important to go in with the right plan to ensure you don't end up just being a farming bot until the 15-minute mark. Misfortune has such an advantage at this stage of the game that you'll want to start thinking about the lane while you're in champion select. Make sure you have the right rooms to take full advantage of the enemy based on the matchup section of the video we've already discussed. The mid game as MF is quite fun because you generally have the lead from the early game and enough damage regardless of your build path to get in the driver's seat for the game. You can control the tempo of the game and force enemies to make mistakes, sometimes just by clipping them with the slow from your long range to make it rain. At the 2 to 3 item power spec, Misfortune is an absolute menace regardless of the build chosen. Misfortune's late game is arguably her weakest when you compare her to other marksmen, but it really depends on which build you're using for the given game. Obviously, the best for the later stages of the game is crit build, but technically speaking, all these build options could make or break the game if piloted correctly. As Misfortune, you're going to be looking to stay in a safe position where you can ideally follow up on your team's engage with a make it rain into bullet time combo to delete any champion stuck in the middle. That's really it though. It's going to require good positioning and forethought to find the safest spot to avoid being dove or interrupted while channeling your ultimate, but it's no different than the mid game. Overall, Misfortune is one of the most overlooked marksmen in League, and it's about time she gets the recognition she deserves. There is good reason she is so dominant in both competitive and in solo queue. While her kit may not seem like it requires much skill mechanically, what we've covered should be sufficient to prove that she at least needs some thought behind her build to be the menace she deserves to be. As always, I hope this guide has helped you out, and I will see you in the next one. Stay fresh.